Hey, Raider Nation. Thank you for joining us on the Only Nation podcast, brought to you by the Raider Ramble and sponsored by Betway. My name is Heidi, but you may know me as Kevlar Prom Dress or even Raider Ladybug. I'm here with T3 Raider Facts, and we're ready to talk some Raiders football together.
All right, Heidi, we are always ready to talk Raiders football here on the Only Nation podcast, and we're going to finish out the season strong, unlike our Raiders, and we'll talk about that in length as we go along.
Today on the show, T3 did not fill it out, so I have nothing to say. We'll be going over...
Sorry about that.
Oops.
We're already in the off season here.
Kind of got to go off script. Well, we will be talking about the completion of the games for the 2022 season and wrapping up the last game that we played in 2023 against the Chiefs, which, thank God, mercifully did not go into overtime.
Yes, and Heidi was mentioning we wanted to do a hero for that game, and I said that mercifully the hero of the game was the clock going to triple zeros.
Yeah, nobody is a game hero this week. I can tell you that from the start. We don't even have to get to the Heidi hero part. There's no game hero.
Got it. Okay, Raider Nation, we would love to hear from you, so here's how you can get in touch with us. Give us a call on the Only Nation podcast voicemail line at 904-701-8667. That's 904-701-8667. You can also check us out on the web at onlynationpod.com. And even when we're in the off season, we're still going to be checking things. So continue to leave us those voicemails, send us those emails. We want to hear from you.
Yeah, even though I do get a little bit slower in the off season, and I'm already slow in the on season.
That's okay. We're all entitled to a little bit of slow right now.
Okay.
Here's the latest Raider news.
Before we even get into the game, on behalf of the show, we would like to extend our continued thoughts and prayers to Damar Hamlin of the Buffalo Bills. The horrible incident on the field occurred the day after we put together our last show, and we didn't get a chance to address it then. This young man has taken center stage over the past week, and it just reminds us all of how fragile life can be, how much we take for granted the sport that these men play for a living, often putting themselves in harm's way. Damar, we are praying for you, and we are glad that you're doing as well as you are.
Absolutely. And over the last few days, just the word that we've been getting from the Cincinnati hospital that he's got full neurological control now. He's been able to, the breathing tube has been taken out. He's been able to communicate with his team. In fact, they even set it up so that he was able to watch the game today versus the Baltimore Ravens. Of course, we're recording this on Sunday. But again, our prayers continue to go out to Damar Hamlin and his family, our support with the Buffalo Bills. And of course, for those of you who are new to the podcast, our connection with the Buffalo Bills franchise goes way back when Ralph Wilson, who was the owner of the longtime owner of the Buffalo Bills, actually contributed money so that the Oakland Raiders at that time could continue to stay afloat. So again, there's some connection between the Bills and the Raiders going all the way back to the old AFL days. So once again, our continued love and support and prayers for Damar Hamlin and the Buffalo Bills organization.
And I love Bills Mafia. As far as a fan base goes, they are one of the craziest ones out there, and I feel a lot of kinship with them when I watch them, throwing themselves on tables and body slamming themselves in the mud, and it just seems like, as far as crazy fan bases go, the Raiders and the Bills are on similar levels.
Probably more so than any other fan bases. I would say probably the Raiders and Bills equate probably more than any other fan bases across any sport.
Right, the Kansas City Chiefs came into Allegiant Stadium on Saturday and defeated the Las Vegas Raiders 31-13. This secured the number one seed in the AFC playoffs for the Chiefs, and Kansas City also won the AFC West Division for the 7th year in a row.
All right, kind of getting tired of saying that. Enough with the division winners. 7 years in a row, it's about time for somebody to take it away. And, of course, we all thought going into the beginning of the season that the Raiders were going to contend for that, and they had some pieces in place, but they just weren't able to put those pieces together. And there's a lot of things that need to be fixed. There's a lot of things that need to be changed. The game was looking pretty good when the Raiders were down 14-3 and they were driving and they were inside the Chiefs' 5-yard line and they got a third down. And on third and fourth down, rather than continuing to run it with Josh Jacobs, they decided to pass the ball. And of course, they didn't get it in and came away with no points. Kansas City then turned around and scored, and that pretty much turned the game around right there. So once again, as we've mentioned so often through the season, the Raiders have been good at points, but they just haven't been as good consistently as they've needed to be to sustain drives and to maintain leads, to hold leads, and to keep games close.
Once again, going away from Josh Jacobs when he's needed the most. Story of 2022.
Absolutely. And the league's leading rusher, when you get inside the 5-yard line, why wouldn't you go to that guy? I mean, even I wouldn't hesitate if you had to give him 4 cracks at it and he didn't get in. I would still say you're giving it your best shot by giving him 4 cracks at it.
Absolutely. Las Vegas Raiders star running back Josh Jacobs was playing Saturday's game with a heavy heart as his dad was rushed to the hospital earlier in the week. Jacobs had gone back to Tulsa, Oklahoma when his father, Marty, underwent emergency heart surgery. Jacobs wrote the word "pops" on his eye black for the game against KC. He said he wasn't going to come back to play, but his father insisted. When he arrived for the game, he was reportedly operating on only 4 hours of sleep.
And I'll tell you what, I know there's no game heroes this week, but if there had to be one, again, it would have to be the Warrior, Josh Jacobs. Having gone through everything he went through with his dad, on the heels of everything that the NFL has gone through with Damar Hamlin, what more adversity do you have to go through? Josh Jacobs continued to put the team on his back and continued to do everything he could to get this team to be successful. He did his part. And again, we'll mention this a little bit later. If we never see him in a Raiders uniform again, I would go ahead and be the first one to put the number 28 jersey on one more time and salute him for all the things he's done for the Silver and Black.
Jarrett Stidham played the entire game for the Raiders. In only his second start, his performance tapered off from the previous week. He was 22 of 36 for 219 yards and 1 touchdown, and he threw 1 interception. He also had 1 lost fumble and was sacked a total of 6 times. On the day, the Raiders were 8 of 16 on third down conversions, but they were only 1 of 3 on conversions in the red zone, including a failed fourth down conversion from the Kansas City 2-yard line.
And as we mentioned, that could have really swung the momentum of the game had they been able to push that in for a touchdown and close that lead early to 14-10. Jared didn't have a horrible game. He didn't have a great game. Certainly tapered off a lot from the performance against the 49ers. And again, 22 of 36, 219 yards is considered pretty pedestrian as far as quarterbacks go. Only 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 1 lost fumble. But again, the offensive line gave up 6 sacks. I mean, anytime your offensive line is giving up that number, you're not going to be successful. Now, some of those, they did look, and the pocket closed in, and it reminded me a lot of the sacks that Carr took earlier in the year. But that's one of the things that's going to have to change. We have to bring in, both through free agency and the draft, in my opinion, at least 2 to 3 more pieces on that offensive line to make it gel. Now, they didn't bring in any other free agents during the regular season. Well, they had opportunities to. They just didn't do it. They ran with what they ran with, and as a result, it came back to bite them. And time again, we've been saying that this offensive line was just destroyed and torn apart by Gruden and Tom Cable, and it was just never built back to the extent that it should have been. And I know there's been a lot of talk about Tom Brady, but I'll tell you this right now. Tom Brady is not coming to the Raiders if they don't fix that offensive line. Now, I've heard some people say that maybe that's the incentive for them to do it. And my take on that is, if it took that as the incentive to do it, why didn't you do it in the first place?
Well, it was funny. I was reading on Facebook after the game, and my friend Michael, he wrote a quote that I just had to screenshot and I just had to say for today regarding Jarrett Stidham's performance. Now, I don't blame Jarrett Stidham at all for his performance. He did the best that he could. But my friend Michael, he wrote, "Oh, the irony. This game was everything the haters said was Carr's fault." And you know what? It was exactly like watching a Derek Carr game.
I saw that, and I had nod my head in agreement with that. And as much as I want to be able to blame, and again, we have been Carr supporters from the get go, and we have defended him all year long. And I have been on many shows this year and said Derek Carr has reached the point of diminishing returns where he's kind of on the downside of his career, but he also, I believe, was in an offense that didn't fit his style. And I thought that he and McDaniels battled all year long. And I believe that McDaniels and Ziegler, and I blame both of them, for selling the Raider Nation a bill of goods where they really thought that we were going to contend. And I thought that they should have come out and said, okay, this is going to be a rebuild year. We had mentioned earlier the Seattle Seahawks were supposed to have the worst team in the league, and yet going into the last week of the season, they were right on the verge of the playoffs. So I think by downselling the results, we would have been much better off than trying to force everybody to believe that we were going to not only make the playoffs, but make a deep run.
Well, and I think everybody saw during that game that gentleman that was holding that sign in the first part of the game that said, "We deserve better." And he was up on the screen for several seconds, and commentators didn't really address it, but it's true. We deserve better.
He was also holding up a sign that said Bench McDaniels, and that actually got him ejected from the stadium.
We deserve better.
Well, we do. We deserve better. Not only that, Heidi, we expect better.
And I've seen a lot of argument about his ejection as well, but I won't, I wasn't there. I didn't see what happened. And all what I can say is the first sign, "We deserve better," was true.
Absolutely. I would 100% agree with that.
The Raiders finished the regular season with a 6-11 record, which is under the 7.5 projected wins the odds had assigned them at the beginning of the year. They now go into the offseason with uncertainties at quarterback, along the offensive line, and across the entire defense. In terms of defense, the Raiders generated fewer turnovers than any other team except for the New Orleans Saints. Raiders forced 13 turnovers, whereas the Saints forced only 12. Have the Saints played already?
I think they were supposed to play later today. These stats were put together earlier in the day, so I'm not sure if they added to that or not.
Yeah, so who knows? The Saints could have already beat the Raiders.
They could have.
Yeah, so the Raiders forced 13. The Saints had only forced 12 through 16 games, and they still have their 17th to play. The Dallas Cowboys led the league with 32.
And they might increase that because, again, as we're putting together the podcast, they hadn't finished out their game yet. So, once again, this defense, Heidi, you and I have talked about this time after time after time. The Raiders have just not concentrated and focused on the defense. They haven't put together a lot of pieces, very many pieces at all. A couple of years ago, they took a couple of swings at linebacker. They signed Corey Littleton to a massive contract and brought in the guy that we refer to as the dude, Kwiatkowski. But neither one of them did very much. And, of course, we still got hit with the dead cap for Littleton, and he's long gone. He didn't do anything. And, of course, they brought in Perryman. Perryman had the injury history, has done pretty well, but they really hadn't addressed the linebacker position much at all. They brought in an aging cornerback in Casey Hayward who had flashes of greatness and was able to perform well in the Gus Bradley defense. But then again, Trayvon Mullen, a second-round draft pick, gone. All of the defensive backs that they picked just didn't pan out. And Amik Robertson, who we didn't even think was going to make the team, has turned out to be one of the best players this year. This Raider team is devoid of talent all across. You've got Max Crosby, you've got Nate Hobbs, and probably, maybe, if he comes back, Denzel Perryman, maybe Bilal Nichols, but very little else. So you're looking next year at probably 6 to 7, maybe even 8 new starters on defense next year. That's what's needed.
So let's wrap up the season. In the words of the immortal Crowded House, let me just say what they said. There's a battle ahead. Many battles are lost, but you'll never see the end of the road while you're traveling with me. Yes, Raider Nation, you'll never see the end of the road while you're traveling with us. Hey now, don't dream. It's over. Thank God.
And that was the line I was waiting for.
Don't dream it's over. What are the team's next steps going into the 2023 season?
All right, now, regardless of what anyone says, I say that the Raiders are in total rebuild mode. I hate that the expectations were as high as they were going into the season, but we all believed that Derek Carr and Devontae Adams would have numbers off the charts and that this offense would not be able to be contained. Well, Devontae wowed and Derek plowed. You heard it from me here. We weren't able to see 4 quarters of consistent winning football in any of the games, and the team crumbled in many situations throughout the course of the year. Now, the starting quarterback since 2014 is gone. Perhaps we've seen the last of the best running back the team has had since Marcus Allen in the form of Josh Jacobs. Both the offensive line and the entire defense, which we just mentioned, needs overhauling. The fan base is calling for Josh McDaniels' head on a platter, and the nation is concerned about the fact that there's no longer a home field advantage at Allegiant Stadium, that it's just a destination city for opposing fans. There's a lot to fix.
That's depressing, dude. What am I supposed to say to that?
Perhaps we're at the bottoming out point. You remember when things got to 2006 and we thought, okay, we've really reached the bottom. Things have got to go up from here. And it took a while to do that, but we started to go up a little bit after that. And I've been in this conversation with several people. When you have just one person who's in charge and firm control of the organization for about 50 years, and you're only looking at things through one person's lens, it's that way or the highway. And Al Davis, love him or hate him, left very little room for negotiation from anybody. He knew what it was going to take for the team to get well. Now, whether he did that or not, obviously during the last part of the years, the last part of his life with the Raiders, it didn't go well. He kept trying to pull the trigger and kept trying to do the things that he believed would benefit the franchise. It just didn't. He just was not able to make good decisions, but he didn't trust anybody else to help him get those decisions made. So I'm hoping now that Mark Davis can place trust in people, and I'm calling on Ziegler now. I'm hoping that he can trust Dave Ziegler to be the one to make the decisions. I'm not placing my trust in McDaniels. Now, at some point, Ziegler's going to have to decide, I think, whether to go with his friend or not. But this is going to be a big season for Ziegler coming up, for him to prove his worth as a general manager for this team.
Yeah, and he would prove his worth to me if he canned McDaniels.
I wouldn't necessarily argue with that. And of course, I've heard Davis say that McDaniels is going to stay there, but I just don't. I wasn't on board with this hire to begin with, and I've tried to give him every benefit of the doubt, but I just haven't seen it. I haven't seen the fire. I haven't seen the consistency. I haven't seen anything that gives me any hope for him as far as this team is concerned.
And I'm of the belief that Josh McDaniels is going to be here for another year. I don't want him to be. I think that he's a walking disaster. I can't stand him as a coach. I mean, there's a reason why I titled one of the episodes, Josh McDaniels Sucks. I think he really does suck. But at the same time, I know that we are very well could be stuck with him. But this season was a big enough disaster that I know he is on thin ice. And if for whatever reason he ended up canned, it wouldn't totally shock me either.
Yeah, we'll just have to see what happens in the offseason. And of course, Raider Nation, we are going to keep a close eye on this. And we're going to get projections all through the offseason. We're going to look at free agency. We're going to look at the draft. We're going to look at potential coaching moves. And of course, it could be the coaches under Josh McDaniels as well as McDaniels himself. But again, my focus really is going to be on Dave Ziegler and the decisions that he makes during the offseason, because I think if Mark Davis has placed his trust in Ziegler, that's where it's going to have to come from.
Okay, switching gears now. Taking a run at Soren's question from last week, let's rank the top 3 and bottom 3 seasons going back to 2003.
Okay, well, for me, the best season was 2021 last year because the team went into the playoffs with a healthy starting quarterback and a lot of momentum with that big win against the Chargers during the last week of the season. The second best was 2016 because the team finally made it back to the playoffs after a 13-year absence. Now, at that point, even though Derek Carr was injured, I thought things had finally turned around. The third best, I thought, was 2015, the season right before that, Jack Del Rio's first year with the team. Even though they finished 7-9, they had made a lot of progress. The class of 2014 was progressing, and Amari Cooper was emerging as a top flight receiver. As far as the worst three, I think you'd have to say Art Shell's return in 2006, where the team just didn't have very much talent and only finished with 2 wins. 2007 was the second worst, beginning with the drafting of Jamarcus Russell, which set the franchise back 5 years at least. And the third worst was 2008 because of all the dysfunction with Lane Kiffin, which resulted in Kiffin's firing and the head coaching duties fell into the lap of Tom Cable. But for me, the most disappointing seasons were 2010 and 2019. In 2010, I really felt like the team was strong and they won every single division game but only finished 8-8. I would have loved for Al Davis to have been able to see his team get back to the playoffs one more time. And in 2019, the last season in Oakland, I really feel like the referees stole the playoffs from the team at its last home game against Jacksonville. If they'd won that game, there was no way they were going to lose to Denver in the last week of the season. It would have been such a great way to leave Oakland on as positive a note as they possibly could have. But in terms of disappointing seasons, 2022 will now rank right up there near the top.
I'd have to agree with you. 2021, it's surprising that it would be ranked so far at the top, really, because of so many things that went wrong. You look at what could have gone wrong in a season, and it was in there. Lost the coach, lost, their starting wide receiver to a horrible incident, and, limped into the playoffs with an interim head coach. But it wasn't just a limping. It was hey, you know what? It was a balls to the wall. I mean, nobody gave them credit for being able to make the playoffs. With 4 games left in the year, everyone considered them out of the playoff race. And yet they made it. And they had a real shot at winning that game. Came down to the very, very end. And 2016, that one, you almost have to rate that in the most disappointing as well because of the injury to Derek Carr and how it ended. But 2010, that season, it felt so promising to me. And the team felt so strong. And so while I wouldn't put it as one of the best seasons, it is a notable season. And while it was disappointing, it was still promising to me. And the last 2 decades, they've been tough. They've been really tough. It's been hard to rank, but I think looking back, you can really see, 2006, 2007, 2008, those were really the lowest of the low times. And things have been looking up, but this year, it's amazing because for the first time in NFL history, a team has had a 1,500-yard rusher and a 1,500-yard receiver on the same team in the same season. And those individual efforts have gone to waste. And it's just a tale of 2 teams, just like the tale of 2 games. So many games, great leads, wasted away, and so much talent put out there on the field, producing, and wasted away. So, yeah, 2022, great disappointing season. It has to rank up there.
When you talk about talent, you talk about the preeminent running back in the league this year, Josh Jacobs, and the preeminent receiver in the league, Devontae Adams. If you would tell anybody that we're going to put those 2 players on your team, they would take that in a heartbeat and say, there's no way that our offense can be defeated because we have these 2 unique pieces, these 2 unique talents on the team. But the Raiders weren't able to equate that to more than 6 wins. So you got to wonder. You got to look at the play calling, and you got to wonder, how can that happen? Again, I know that Josh is the head coach. He's currently the head coach. And that's the way that's going to be going into the offseason unless things change. But when you have those 2 pieces, dynamic pieces, game-changing pieces and can't make things work to more than a 6-11 record. I don't care who your quarterback is, you got to make things work.
Yeah, and it's really just makes me wonder what would an Andy Reid, Bill Belichick, even a Mike Tomlin, who is a severely underrated coach, what would they have done with the team? I think we would be preparing for a playoff berth if they were the head coaches.
I will make the bold statement right now. I don't think there's any other NFL coach out there in the AFC. In fact, I would say maybe AFC and NFC combined, who, if you take Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams and put both of those players on those teams, they're not going to the Super Bowl and maybe winning the whole thing.
And on that happy note, T3, how about your top 3 for the week?
T3's top 3.
All right, number 1. Prayers go out to the family of Josh Jacobs. As we mentioned earlier, his father underwent emergency heart surgery this past week, and Josh played the game against Kansas City on very little rest. We all wish his dad and his family the best, and if Josh Jacobs never appears in a Raiders uniform again, I want to personally take this opportunity to thank him for his work over the past 4 seasons. He has been the heart and soul of this team since his arrival. Number 2. Max Crosby continues to impress. Despite the fact that he's got very little help this year, he never took a playoff during the course of the season, was constantly double-teamed, held on almost every play, and yet continued to do his best to pick up his teammates during the course of the season. Now, this is a wake-up call for the entire organization. Let's finally get him some help. And number 3, social media went crazy after the Chiefs game, noting how much red was in Allegiant Stadium for the game. People are saying that the Vegas community is not supporting the Raiders like Oakland did back in the day. I just want to say first that for many years, Oakland home games were blacked out because of lack of attendance. It only improved in 2012 when the league said they only had to sell out 85% in order to lift the blackout. There have been many games at Allegiant that have been heavily in favor of the Raiders, but the team has to win in order to make that hold up. Let's serve this as a notice to the organization. Just win, baby. And that is this week's top 3.
And Josh Jacobs, our prayers do go out to you and your family. We hope that your father is doing well, and we hope that you have many more happy years together with him. Max Crosby, it's not like the Raiders aren't trying to get him some help. Chandler Jones definitely was a signing in that direction, but you know what? Yannick Ngakoue left the team, and he had a pretty decent year, numbers-wise. Chandler Jones did not. I'm just saying. And social media went crazy after the Chiefs game. Yes, you know what? Social media also went crazy for over not only the red in the Chiefs game, but the ring around the rosy play. Wasn't that cute? That was just a tiny bit disrespectful, but you know what? I almost think we deserve that.
Well, the only comment I'm going to make about that is I want the Raiders to put that in their back pocket. And the next time they beat Kansas City, when they win and the clock goes to 0-0, the entire team goes out to the center of the field and does the ring around the rosy. I think that should be the new tradition for this Raiders team when they beat the Chiefs.
That works for me. But yeah, after the way the Raiders played, it's like you can't feel disrespected based on that. I mean, you've got to put something out on the field in order to, be able to stand up and fight against something like that. So yeah, take it, put it in your back pocket, get pissed off, and go and do it to them. Go and do it to them in Arrowhead, in front of nothing but Chiefs fans.
I felt disrespected just watching the game. And I commented to somebody who was watching the game with when they went into the ring around the rosy. I said, if Matt Millen had been out on the field, he would have looked at the guy next to him and said, "Here, hold my beer."
Well, you know what? We're only a few days away from the anniversary of that incident.
Yeah. Which happened against which team?
The Patriots.
Absolutely.
All right, give us a call at 904-701-8667. Leave a voicemail or text message at that number, or send in a message via social media, and we'll share your thoughts. And our Raider Reads this week.
All right, we got 2015 up next. Then, since we're going to be off a week or two, I'll get busy and put together the next two episodes, which are 2016 and 2017. So I'm going to try to get them to Heidi this week. Hopefully, the 2015 episode will be up this week. If not, it certainly will be out next week. So stay tuned for those episodes, and we'll get you current pretty soon.
Yeah, we'll get them out to you. And this little project is starting to wrap up. Kind of weird.
Actually, it's not wrapping up. I've got big news as we get into the off season.
Oh boy. All right, let's find out what we do or we don't know.
All right, it's time for another edition of Did You Know? In this segment, I will ask Heidi and all of our listening audience a Raiders-related question with a list of answers to choose from. It's multiple choice, so just give it your best guess. Now, here's this week's question. I feel confident you're going to get this one right. Going way back in Raiders history, long before Allegiant Stadium and the Oakland Coliseum, what was the Raiders' first home stadium? Was it A, Candlestick Park? Was it B, Kezar Stadium? Or was it C, Frank Ewell Field?
Why don't you just ask me what the Raiders' colors are?
Well, I gave you a hint.
The hint is it was a stadium.
Okay, look at your answer choices again.
I know it's not Frank Ewell Field because it wasn't Frank Ewell Field until later on.
Correct.
And the first part is a trick question. I know that. But the very first stadium that the Raiders had as their home field was Kezar Stadium. They started off at Kezar and then they finished at Candlestick.
You're correct. It was a stadium. It was Kezar Stadium. That was the very first one. And you're correct. See, so you went with your instincts. You knew your history. And there's your answer. So Kezar Stadium is the first stadium that the Raiders called their home way back in 1960. And that is this week's Did You Know?
Yes. And the Raiders did play at Candlestick Park as their home stadium as well.
Absolutely. And they played there several times as an away.
Yes, they did. Well, they even played a home game in Las Vegas long before they ever stepped foot in Allegiant Stadium. That was
Right.
for preseason, correct?
Preseason game back in, gosh, it was way back. I put it in one of the Raider Roops episodes, but yeah, it was way back in the 60s, I believe.
Yeah, long time.
Yep. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now it is time for Heidi's Heroes.
Flying away on a wing and a prayer. Who could it be?
All right, Raider Nation. There are a lot of people who have been praised for their handling of the traumatic events of Monday night after Damar Hamlin suffered cardiac arrest on the field, but none more so than Denny Kellington, whose quick reaction saved the safety's life. Hamlin collapsed after landing a hit on Bengals receiver T. Higgins in the first quarter, causing medical staff to quickly spring into action. Now, brain injuries can rapidly occur in patients suffering from cardiac arrest, with tissue starting to die within minutes of being deprived of oxygen. And Kellington's quick reactions to administering CPR to Hamlin has proven to be the matter of life or death. After news circulated that Hamlin was showing signs of improvement and was communicating with his teammates, people began searching for the man who began immediately performing life-saving CPR. That man was Kellington, an Oklahoma State University graduate who has been with the Bills for 5 years after spending over a decade as the head athletic trainer at Syracuse University. Hamlin went into cardiac arrest during the contest in Cincinnati. Doctors say that Hamlin initially had a pulse at the stadium and then lost it. It was then that Kellington was able to quickly restart his heart and restore blood flow to his brain as players from both teams and millions of television viewers looked on in shock. Doctors treating Hamlin at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center said the immediate recognition that there was something significantly wrong and the rapid response by Kellington and others was crucial to his survival. The Bills training staff who was with him immediately recognized that this was not a run-of-the-mill injury and that they had a significant event on their hands and immediately responded, Dr. Timothy Pritz told reporters earlier on Thursday. This went as well as something like this can go under very challenging circumstances. They did a fantastic job, which is why we are here today. So who is Kellington? He earned his bachelor's degree at Oklahoma State as a member of the training staff on the Cowboys football team as an intern between 1996 and 1999. From there, he interned with the Denver Broncos as an athletic training intern. After getting his degree in 2002, he went overseas to be the assistant athletic trainer for the Amsterdam Admirals of NFL Europe. He went back to Ohio State following one season in Holland and worked with the field hockey and women's lacrosse teams while earning his master's degree. Following his time there, he took up residence in central New York as head athletic trainer of the Syracuse Orange football team. He remained in that post for over a decade before deciding to move 2 hours west to his current position with the Bills in 2017. It was with the Bills that Kellington was doing his job, one that he had been trained to do all his life. Despite the preparation, Bills head coach Sean McDermott still claimed Kellington's actions were amazing. For an assistant to find himself in that position and needing to take the action that he did is nothing short of amazing, McDermott told reporters. You talk about a real leader, a real hero. In saving Damar's life, I admire his strength. Bills quarterback Josh Allen echoed McDermott's sentiments about the training staff in Kellington. I want to thank our training staff for going out there, not knowing what was going on, but going through a checklist and saving his life, an emotional Allen said. And it's for his training, knowledge, and immediate action that NFL fans are already calling for Kellington to be properly honored. Supporters are asking for Kellington and the rest of the Bills training staff to remarkably be enshrined in Canton, Ohio, in the Pro Football Hall of Fame for their life-saving actions in Cincinnati. If that jacket isn't his future, Kellington will be remembered for what he did on the field, saving the life of a young man who needed help and being the man to provide that for him as the rest of the world watched on and prayed for the best possible outcome. And I'd like to thank Jake Fenner for his great write-up on dailymail.com and Reuters, where I got a lot of this information. Jenny Kellington, what you did was absolutely amazing. You were trained. You did exactly what you needed to do, exactly at the right time. And you did everything in the best way possible. You have truly earned the naming of being Heidi's hero this week. Thank you for everything you've done on behalf of NFL fans everywhere. Thank you, Denny Kellington. You are a hero.
And I'm sure Damar Hamlin and his entire family are indebted to Denny for the rest of their lives. And it's impacted the Buffalo Bills organization. It's impacted the entire city of Cincinnati. It's really impacted the entire world. And I saw this on social media. It's kind of interesting that on the field at the time, probably the one guy who was making the least amount of money of anybody on the field was performing the most heroic action of anybody, not only in the stadium, but anybody in the world at that moment in time.
Yeah, one time when I was working at a venue, baseball field, we had one of our workers go down with sudden cardiac arrest. And thankfully, everything came together. I ran and got the AED, and first aid just happened to be walking around the corner when that happened. So first aid was able to respond immediately, start CPR immediately. I got the AED to him, and he survived. And it was amazing because it was just the lowly little first aid guy, and he did everything right. He had been trained for years and put everything together and, saved the guy's life. And, I'm still in contact with the person that he saved. He got a standing ovation next time he walked into a team meeting at that venue. And it's pretty incredible how something so simple can make the difference between life and death. And, it's really, It's a reminder to everyone to make sure you know CPR. It doesn't take much. Take a class. All it takes is a Saturday. Learn how to do CPR. You don't have to have an active card. Just learn how to do it. You never know whose life you're going to save.
And you beat me to the punch on that because, again, I work out at the airport, and every day before a shift, they say, is there anybody here who's CPR certified? And I shoot my hand up because for years as a teacher, I kept my CPR active and certifications going. It's really important, and you never know when you'll be thrust into that moment and called upon to perform a life-saving act. So, like you said, it's very important that everybody be aware of what they can do because you never know when you're going to be thrust in that position to be a hero. I think everybody would be in a much better position and feel better about themselves if they knew what to do, as opposed to standing there and not knowing what to do and seeing somebody, perhaps even a loved one, lose their life as a result.
Yeah, I actually had initially been trained to do CPR when I was in junior high school, and it's something that I've been trained to do many times over the years. And I have had to do CPR before. Unfortunately, the results were not desirable, but it surprised me because I got into that situation and suddenly I knew what to do. And the reason I knew what to do was because I had been trained so many times. And it's a surreal feeling, but it's something that you do feel good about yourself because you know what to do and you feel confident that you can do it. And so if you have never learned, take that class. If you have taken that class in the past and your certification has lapsed or it's been a few years, go ahead and take that class again. At least review it, brush up on it online. It doesn't take much time, and you could definitely save a life.
And if you're listening to the podcast and you are certified in CPR, send us a note on the Only Nation podcast. I'll send you a little special something in the mail. I promise.
There you go. And that about does it for this week on the Only Nation podcast. If you'd like to help support the show, you can send in a donation at paypal.me/onlynationpod. You can find me, Heidi Stabbert, on social media as at Kevlar Prom Dress on Twitter and Instagram, or Heidi Stabbert on Facebook. You can also find me on YouTube on Captain Jack Rackham's channel every other Tuesday night. I join the DC wench Peggy Holmes and Angria Trask on Silver and Black Ladies Night. Now, the Only Nation podcast will be taking a couple of weeks off, and we'll be right back right before the Super Bowl. And then we'll start talking about the free agency and the draft.
All right, Raider Nation, as our podcast continues to grow, we would like you on board with us, so please contact the show. Send us your name and address so we can send you some free Raider swag and podcast stickers. Call us and tell us what you want to know. Throw us an interesting nugget that we can use on one of our upcoming episodes and become a part of what we're doing here. Remember, this is the Only Nation, and we want you to be a part of it. So call us 904-701-8667. That's 904-701-8667. Call us now and join the Only Nation podcast family. There are two easy ways to find me on social media. You can send me a tweet at T3_sports703, as several of you do, or you can hit me up on Facebook at Tom, THOM Jones. And thank you again for your support of the Raider Roots podcast. And the next 3 episodes will cover the years 2015, 2016, and 2017, and then we'll get into the John Gruden era part 2. Please give me your feedback on the episodes and tell me what you want to know more about.
As always, we look forward to hearing from you. We'll be back with you in a couple of weeks. Until next time, everyone, don't dream, it's over. And go Raiders.
We are not just a nation. Remember, we are the only nation. Keep the faith, Raider Nation, because we'll be back as we continue to go through the offseason in 2023, and we're going to come back better than ever.
Raiders.